Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back to another episode at the Bitcoin Stoa. As a reminder, the Bitcoin Stoa is a community-funded platform. So if you enjoy listening, you can support the project by sending some sats to the QR code on our homepage at bitcoinstoa.com, or you can stream sats using something like the Breeze wallet, which has a really badass podcast feature. And at the end of the day, if you find any of these conversations useful or helpful, share it with someone you know who's curious about Bitcoin, because that's how we get to a Bitcoin future. Current Moscow time is 23:25 at 7:18 190. And with that said, in this episode, I'm speaking with Brandon and Dan from Green Candle Investments. Gentlemen, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. I'm excited to get ripping on that orange pill.
Nice. Yes. Anyone willing to have a conversation about Bitcoin is welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa, basically, a Stoa in ancient Greece was like a covered portico where anyone was welcome. You could get like balling politicians or just random street people, and they could have conversations about anything non-judgmentally, or at least in theory, non-judgmentally. So that's kind of what the Stoa is, and maybe a good place to start, because this is both your first times at the Stoa, is to start with your Bitcoin stories. So how and when did Bitcoin find you, and any of the more significant moments along the path until today? And maybe Brandon, you go first.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that the first time I probably heard about Bitcoin was back in 2012. I had a buddy who was in the business school at the University of Texas, and he said that, somebody came in and talked to him about it, and it was kind of the future. But that was, the last I kind of thought about it for then. And then I was in graduate school at Texas A&M, was driving Uber, trying to get by, make some money here or there. And I figured I needed to invest some money to actually, grow my wealth. I realized that, Uber wasn't really doing it, and what I was making at graduate school was a very small amount. So I was doing it more with trading in 2016. And then I started doing some personal research. I listened to a lot of podcasts, just figuring out different ways to invest. And one of the podcasts was a We Study Billionaire podcast with Preston Pish. It was before he started the Bitcoin specific one that he's got going on now, but he had Saifedean on and Plan B back-to-back weeks. And those two episodes really spoke to me, and I decided to look more into Bitcoin. And from there I decided to start holding. And then in 2018, when I got my first big boy job and actually started getting some income, that's when I started dollar cost averaging in and holding since then. And now here I am, a few years into it, and still learning every single day.
Powerful. Yeah, man. Like with all the podcasts and all the great content that's out there now, um, I always tell people, like, you can do a self-directed PhD if you're good at curating podcasts about Bitcoin. And I don't really know of any other allocation of my time that gives me back a better ROI than just learning about Bitcoin. And it's like learning about Bitcoin means a lot of things, right? It like literally means learning how the mechanics and truth of the world works, which is a fucking broad ass subject topic. But yeah, very cool. And good on you for, doing the deep dive. There's everyone I talk to, there's almost always like some sort of seminal podcast or article they read that really like flicks the switch where they're like, I got to look into this way more now. And so, yeah, shout out to Preston Pish for helping you get through that journey. Powerful. Dan, let's hear what your Bitcoin story is.
Sure. Yeah, Brandon actually got me involved.
Nice.
So
how do you guys know each other?
Well, so Brandon and I know each other from the University of Memphis. We both ran track and cross country at Memphis, and so we met. I don't know, 2012. Brandon, is that your freshman year?
Yeah, I started in 2012. So I mean, maybe 2011 for my recruiting visit or whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah. Brandon had a pretty wild recruiting visit, and so yeah.
All right, we got to tell that story. If it's that good, you got to tell us a little. We got to get a little snippet there.
Well, we had one kid on the team. I won't mention his name, but he almost got arrested. Brandon was 18, maybe. I don't know. Oh, geez. I don't know if we can really say everything that we were doing on the recruiting visit, but things that 18-year-olds probably shouldn't be doing. And so Brandon got to witness one guy on the team almost get arrested. He witnessed us. I think we got him back to his hotel at like 3 a.m. and it was his check-in was at like 3 a.m. So our coach saw that on the receipt, which wasn't great for us. But anyways, when Brandon left from that recruiting visit, we all thought for sure, like, there's no way this kid's coming here. He was quiet on the visit. He saw one of us almost get arrested. Like, there's zero chance he comes here. And I don't know, a couple days later, a coach is like, "Oh, hey, Brandon committed. He's coming." So,
Nice. You passed the test, Brandon.
yeah. So that's
Exactly.
so that's how we know each other. And then I finished a year ahead of Brandon from Memphis. I went to graduate school at East Carolina, and then he went to graduate school when he finished. And then when he was finishing up his master's degree, I was still doing my PhD. And somehow we kind of got connected again. I forget exactly how. I think Brandon was maybe working on, he had some, I think, programming problem or something. And we both have programming backgrounds. And so he gave me a shout, and I tried to help him out. I don't know if it worked or not, but we got reconnected that way somehow, I believe in like 2020. And then in 2021, I was wrapping up my PhD. I got my first, big boy job, started making money. And I knew Brandon was involved in investing, and I knew a little bit that he was into Bitcoin at that time. And so I just started talking to him about it. He got me hooked up with like a really basic investing platform called Acorns. I'm sure some of your listeners know about Acorns. And from that, it was like just a crazy deep dive, like into investing in general. And then he started telling me about Bitcoin. And I'm a numbers guy kind of by nature. Like, I'm a data scientist. I did a lot of research, did a lot of data processing, things like that. So that's what initially hooked me in, actually, was like just the data side of Bitcoin. But then I was like Brandon, started listening to Preston Pish, started listening to like Alex Gladstein, had a big impact on me, just showing like what Bitcoin is fundamentally. Like, forget about having access to blockchain data, forget about all of that. Just thinking more about it philosophically is what really triggered me to say, yeah, man, I'm going all in on this thing. So all through 2021, that's what I did, is I just dug more and more in, and I'm still learning every day, man. I consume multiple podcasts. I read multiple books. It's like the information never stops. So yeah, that's my story.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, with Bitcoin, there's never a lack of information. The hardest part is like really filtering through what's the most important information that I'm ready to learn right now. Yeah, even just staying caught up is hard, let alone really learning the deep stuff and how this elephant of Bitcoin can have so many different sides and totally different areas to touch, but trying to understand how the elephant fits into the picture and the systems integration that it touches in all the systems in the world. I think it's really it's a really powerful rabbit hole to go down if you really want to go down it and you really love learning. Yeah, I think you have to really love learning because it's a lot to take in. And there's this saying that you won't change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin will change you. What are your takes on sort of, like, how has Bitcoin changed you, if in any way, since you first got involved, in terms of like the most significant things that come to mind?
Yeah, I'll go first on this one. I think, initially with Bitcoin, I came in for the money, but I stayed for, the powerful technology behind it, and, kind of, the money and bringing that money and access to it, the global network, to everybody. So I think, Bitcoin has kind of made me more self-sovereign, taking ownership of just about everything. I realize like how much we rely on, other people to, just like we kind of rely on banks to manage our money and hold on to those things. So throughout this investing journey, it's kind of taken me, down that rabbit hole. I started, like Dan mentioned, him and I both ran cross country and track in college. So I was in good shape at one point in time, and then I kind of fell off, and not that I got big or anything, but I've kind of started working out again and caring about my health, and
Cool.
just all aspects of my life, just kind of taking ownership of that. And because I've been interested in Bitcoin and there's so much to learn about it, it's also made me realize, I want to be a lifelong learner. Just always be open to everything, consume as much information as I can, and network with more intelligent people than myself. I'm not afraid to admit, yeah, I'm well educated. I have a master's degree, but there's a lot smarter people out there who have done this research for a lot longer of time. So I'm always trying to listen in and see if things make sense and not be afraid to ask questions. So yeah, Bitcoin has just made me a lifelong learner and take ownership of every aspect of my life.
Very cool. Yeah, I come from a like the last 5 years of my life have been spent working on trying to help solve the health problem, and essentially working for a health network whose sole mission is to help people reclaim responsibility for their health. And I see a lot of parallels with what we were doing there and what I see Bitcoin doing to people, where it's scary to take full responsibility for your health. It's scary to take full responsibility for your financial wealth as well. But it's incredibly satisfying. And I don't know if there's anything more worthwhile, right? Like I always tell people, you might have a job or a career, but your first job is be healthy. Because if you can't do that job right, all the other jobs don't matter. In fact, you can't even do the other jobs. And it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin or monopoly money you've accumulated. If you're not healthy, you can't really make good use of that for an enjoyable life. And so, yeah, I love how whether people start with health, taking responsibility for their health, and then migrate over to taking responsibility for their money, or vice versa. It just seems like Bitcoin is an incredible catalyst to allow people, number one, the time, because taking responsibility for your health takes time. And if your time's constantly getting stolen, well, you're kind of screwed. But I love how radical responsibility is like a core fundamental element of Bitcoiners. And those are the kind of people I want to be around, to be quite frank, right? People who take ownership for their emotions, the way they think, their health, their money. Like it's really, it's infectious to be around Bitcoiners. And yeah, I think that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. And then, yeah, go ahead. What's your take on how Bitcoin has changed you, Dan?
I would echo all of those points. I think it's
Cool.
the ultimate lesson in personal responsibility. It's you have to take ownership over your own life, and that spreads out, like you were saying, into your personal physical health, but it's also your financial health. And so I've always been that way with my physical health. Like I've always tried to stay in shape, and I've always thought those things like, well, I've got a responsibility to myself to be healthy. But I never ever thought about it from a financial perspective until I started to really dig into Bitcoin. Like I was like I never really even thought about money that much. I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money, and it was kind of a taboo subject. Like we didn't really talk about it. We knew we didn't have that much, but we never really talked about it. So I didn't learn how to manage a budget. I didn't learn any of that stuff. So Bitcoin made me really start thinking about my financial well-being. And 2022 is like the first year that I've set hard financial goals for myself, which is crazy to think about, man. I'm going to be 30 years old this year. And it's the first time in my life where I sat down and I said, here's my physical goals. I want to run under 16 minutes for 5K again. I want to get my bench to a certain amount. But this is the first year ever I've set like hard financial goals for myself, and mapped out a plan to actually achieve those things. So yeah, the personal responsibility part of it in the financial realm is probably the biggest thing that it's done for me. And I always relate it to you. We were talking about how, it's when you take responsibility for something, it is much harder. Like it's way easier to just say, I'll take a CBDC and I'll let the government control it. And that way, if something goes wrong, it's not something I did, it's probably something that they messed up. I relate it back to, I went to private schools when I was growing up, and we had a dress code. And when you have a dress code, it's like, you don't have options in the morning. You have to meet the dress code. And it's the same pair of pants and the same button up shirt and the same tie every day. Right. So it's like, it is easier because you don't have to make choices in the morning. You just throw on your outfit and you go to school. But like, I happen to really like choices. I like making my own choices. I like taking control of things. Like Brandon's laughing. I don't get along well with people that try to tell me what to do or how to act. So,
I can relate.
so that's, yeah, man, just the personal responsibility aspects of it has been huge for me. I've always been that way outside of financials, but yeah, 2021, deep diving into Bitcoin, it really made me take control over my financial well-being.
Cool. Yeah, I love that you made, like, I think not enough people actually intentionally plan things, right? I see this with health all the time. People come up to me and they're like, I want to be healthy. What do I do? And the first thing I ask them is like, well, what does health mean to you? And they can't answer. They haven't actually thought about defining that. And I'm like, okay, well, you want to get somewhere that you don't even know where it is. or what it looks like or how to even define that word, it's going to be really hard to get there because you don't even know where you're going. And I think this whole notion that planning allows you to see the lighthouse. You might not get there in a really straightforward way. It won't be probably as easy as you think it is, but it's important to have the lighthouse there, even if you dynamically update where that lighthouse is. And yeah, I think the start of every new year is like a really powerful moment for me in my life to just like set a new intention and then make like a loosely defined plan of like, okay, this is where I want to get to. This is what I want to do. This is how I think I can get there best right now. And like plugging in, like hard coding in audits throughout the year of like, how am I actually doing with that? Oh, I messed up there. Okay, well, maybe was that the right goal or did I just not execute right? And I think intentionality is like very important, and I don't think enough people do that. So good on you for making those making those hard coded objectives for yourself. I'd love to hear what you guys think about what it means to be a Bitcoiner. If you do identify as a Bitcoiner, what does it mean to you? And Brandon, maybe you can start this one off. Like someone says, what is a Bitcoiner? What does being a Bitcoiner mean to you? What would you say?
I mean, it means a lot. That's a hefty question for sure. I don't think that anybody could really give a short
There's no wrong
1-2
answer.
yeah, 1-2 punch here. But I'll say it's kind of ties back to my why I started Green Candle with Dan, and I think that the reason I started it was just to share the wealth, share knowledge, and I think that that's what the Bitcoin community has really brought to me, especially with this past year, starting it. We write newsletters and do things like that, and we reach out to Bitcoiners all the time to have them guest write on our newsletter sometimes, and every single one has been extremely generous with their time, and that's what being a Bitcoiner to me is just reaching out to people, trying to help people in any which way they can, just building each other up. I think like a lot of this investing and things like that, people think people on Wall Street are very money hungry and just kicking, that's how the media portrays it, just kicking the poor people down and everything like that. But my experience in this space and in Bitcoin in general is just people building each other up and people trying to help in any which way, shape or form. Whether that's hey, somebody in El Salvador needs some sats or something, you see people sending satoshis across the internet, across Twitter, things like that, just to help out where they can. And there's a lot of great companies out there that are building great networks to through Bitcoin and just to help people out, and that's what's been truly inspiring to me, and I think that's what being a Bitcoiner is all about.
That's a good answer, dude. You did well. Daniel, what about you?
Mine will maybe be a little bit more technical. I think being a Bitcoiner means that you believe in hard money. You believe like in the power of what money does for individuals and like across the entire world. So, everything Brandon said is true. I agree with it 100%, but I think being a Bitcoiner really means that you understand that these games that we've been playing with fiat currencies have like real world detrimental consequences for people globally. And Bitcoin provides the solution to that. I know it's a meme that says Bitcoin fixes this, but like, it really does fix the money problem in the world. And so many things grow on top of the money problem that, if we can fix the root cause of it, man, that's what being a Bitcoiner is all about. If we can build products and spread the knowledge about Bitcoin, I think that you really do change the world. So yeah, being a Bitcoiner to me is just believing in hard money and knowing how many things that can fix.
Yeah, that's great. I love the sentiment there is that, and to me, being a Bitcoiner means like obviously you have skin in the game, you own Bitcoin, but stopping there I don't think is enough. I think this whole notion of being an active catalyst to the expansion of Bitcoin to more people, and really, like you said, Brandon, building each other up, but also just like helping build more bridges, helping more people see that this is like the portal to the next system. And the sooner you take it, the better off you're going to be. And for most people, the limiting element is just understanding, right? They haven't been shown what Bitcoin is in a way that relates to them or solves a problem that they have. They still see it as something, they still see it as crypto, to be quite frank. I think a lot of people, they lump it into the same basket, and I don't blame them for not being interested in it if they think it's just crypto. But Yeah, I think it's very powerful. And there's, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you see it, you want to tell everyone. And I think this is this like really human networking element of the game theory of Bitcoin, where it's like, it's literally viral. And the people who see it and are given mass benefit from it by seeing their wealth increase as everything else sort of like starts to crumble around us. I think that really it gives you a sense of purpose that like I need to tell other people about this, because as a thanks to Bitcoin for having done this in my life, and also now being granted more time in my life because I'm protecting my time instead of having it stolen from me. Let's talk about Green Candle. You mentioned Green Candle, so you guys both work for Green, or you're both they're the two people behind Green Candle Investments. So I'd love to hear sort of like, what's the story of Green Candle? Why did you start it? You talked about that a little bit, Brandon, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. And then what's the mission of the project? Like, who are you trying to work with? What are you trying to do? What's the why of Green Candle Investments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how we got started, like Dan said, we kind of, lost a little bit of contact maybe after we graduated from Memphis. And then we kind of got reconnected back in 2020. And I was just in a group message with him and some of my old teammates. And I was telling them, about different investing things. And I was like, you guys should really get invested, look into this, look into that. And nobody really took me seriously except for Dan. And so because of that, we kind of started talking a bunch more offline and separate from that chat. And so I just kind of told them, I think that while we're learning all this stuff together and talking about it so much, I think other people would benefit from this. I've tried to reach out to some friends and some are receptive, but most aren't. But I know that there's some people out there that this can definitely help, because I was in that spot at one point in time where I didn't know anything and I was just searching for some material. And I kind of saw there's a lot of people that give a little technical analysis and things like that, and maybe have like finance backgrounds and other things. And Dan and I were both not we both don't have financial backgrounds, but we both understand numbers, data guys. So I thought, maybe we could use our skill sets and a little bit of our personality to kind of, spread our knowledge and let everybody know about what we're learning. I think a lot of different spaces, whether it's, financial, real estate, Bitcoin, what have you, they all kind of blend together for me. I really do love the Bitcoin space and everything like that. But, when I first got started, I was looking at mostly just the stock market, and then I kind of did a dive into real estate. And then, then I went into Bitcoin. And so I think I bring a little bit of a unique perspective to the Bitcoin realm. And I thought, why not share my thoughts? And basically we started it to bring it to the average Joe and bring it to our friends and family, and help people get started and get invested in some way, shape, or form. Because whether Bitcoin really drives them or it's something else, there's something out there that you can invest in to kind of help grow your wealth and get yourself motivated behind. Because like I said before, as why I thought you were a Bitcoiner, and what Bitcoin means to me is you really got to take ownership of these things. And I think you can have a financial advisor and do those things if you'd like, but I also think there's something powerful behind knowing where your money's going, and how you can grow it and you can control it. And then when you control it, it's just so much more rewarding in my opinion. And so that's at least my mission behind Green Candle, to kind of help everybody who wants to take control of their money and thus help take control of their life, kind of build that and bring them as much information as we can, and a little bit of a unique voice.
Amazing. Yeah. And good information from people who are coming at it with the right intention and with aligned interest is like very empowering. And I think, a lot of people contributing to the space are essentially sort of distilling, like, the internet is a crazy fucking place, right? There's so much noise, there's so much crap. It's actually really hard to navigate. And so you don't need someone to necessarily prescriptively tell you need to do this. But what is really valuable, I think, these days is actually curating the internet, the interweb, into signal that you've been able to essentially mine out and present that signal to other people so that they can make their own judgments, right? It's not saying you must do this. Like, this is our approach with same thing with the Foot Collector with health. It's like, we're going to tell you what to do, but we'll tell you that most of this shit is bullshit, and it can be way simpler than you think. And when it's simpler, and it becomes empowering, right? Because you can actually understand it. It's not beyond you to understand how to invest. It's not beyond you to understand health. And I think there's such a big parallel for me where we essentially forfeit the responsibility for our money over to banks and trust that they're doing what they should be doing. We forfeit our responsibility for our health over to medicine and to rehab, assuming that they know what they're doing and they're doing it in our best interest. And many good players in the health realm do silly things, not because they're trying to be silly, but because, like, I'm a physical therapist by training. I have a master's degree in physical therapy. I graduated knowing nothing about health. I thought I knew everything about health. Turns out I knew everything about how to tell people what disease they have and how to, like, put a Band-Aid on it, but nothing about how to help people not get disease in the first place. And I think it's like, you talk about how you came at this with a background in finance. I actually think that's a benefit, because all the people I know that worked in finance have the most resistance to being able to understand the truth about finance, because they have to unlearn all the shit they paid a lot of money and time to learn. And so I think the curious individual who can look at things from first principles and can be resourceful with finding good resources is way better off than anyone with a financial background, regardless of how deep, because most of what they learned is bullshit. Dan, what about you? How do you see your role at Green Candle, and what motivates you to work on this with Brandon?
Sure. Yeah. So my role is CEO, CFO.
What's Brandon? What's Brandon? A volunteer?
Brandon's an intern at the moment. No, I mean, I really like the idea that Brandon and I, we could bring this all full circle, because I agree with everything Brandon said. We wanted to provide content to people where it's two guys trying to figure things out at the same time that you might be trying to figure things out. Right. It makes it relatable. I have a hard time sitting down and watching people in suits discuss things in a congressional hearing and trying to figure out, like, what in the world's going on. I have a much easier time watching, like them or hate them. I love watching Barstool videos where it's just dudes talking to each other, and they're like, there's some comedic relief to it. There's whatever. So it's relatable. Like, it's more relatable. And so I thought, I'm coming into this, I'm brand new. Brandon had more experience in investing and more experience in Bitcoin than me. And we were just talking about it. And it's like, man, let's just record some of this stuff, or let's go public with it. Like, it's going to help us learn. And then we can use that to drive content too. So, that's kind of what I see Green Candle as. We're just trying to help people come to a better understanding of the world. And just to go back on the idea that you're not trying to tell people exactly what to do. You're trying to help them refine their own filters, right? So if you think about it from a signal processing point of view, it's like there's signal and then there's a bunch of noise, and you're trying to reduce noise and magnify signal. And you don't really want to, like, point to something and tell someone this is signal, because then they're reliant on you to tell them what's signal. You want to help them develop their own filtering techniques, right? And so that's kind of what I'm hoping Green Candle is. As a physical therapist, right? You don't necessarily want to have everything that the person does only be in your gym or your rehabilitation center, right? Otherwise, they have to keep coming back to you. Exactly. Right? You want to be able to figure out, like, all right, once you go into the real world, you've got to figure stuff out on your own, and you've got to stay healthy on your own, and you've got to, whatever. So that's kind of what I see Green Candle as, is we're just a couple of guys that are making content for people, and hopefully they find it useful, and we're learning along the way with them. So,
yeah. And I think documenting your learning is both good in that it actually gives you a digital memory of the path that you took. So from a perspective of, like, it's like you journaling your learning journey, right? Like taking notes and logging the things you're learning. But at the same time, it's like, if you can just put that on the internet and let anyone access it, if like 10 people benefit from it and the whole time, I think that's probably a positive, because you're getting benefit from it by just taking a little bit deeper intention with the way you're doing things. Even just writing, like, I polish so many thoughts in what I write, and most of what I write, I don't even put out there. I just do it because of the experience of writing it out is actually very beneficial to me. So I really love this whole notion that we're just sharing in hopes that, whenever I share something, I hope I get proven wrong. And, if the person learns something new, great. If the person has a different perspective that goes against mine, even better, because I'd rather learn than be right. But you have to put things out into the public domain in order for other people to be able to take them, play with them, add to them, counter them. Like these are, if your whole mission is to learn and not be right, then nothing, like putting it out to as many people as possible is the best way to do that.
So it holds you accountable too, right? Like I would love to be wrong, and I'd love for someone to explain to me why I'm wrong so that I can learn. And again, it's just that thing of like, when you're doing it publicly, it's all you're doing is adjusting your filter, and you're trying to figure out along the way, this is what's important, this is not what's important. And so if we can do it publicly and help as many people as possible, that's what we're trying to do.
And it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's very fun
too.
I like arguing with people, generally speaking. So it is fun.
Yeah, and I think
that's an understatement for Dan.
About Bitcoiners, we don't take ourselves too seriously. Like we can still fuck around and joke around. I mean, we're very serious at times, and don't get us wrong, we're very strong in our convictions and our opinions in general. But at the same time, like we don't take ourselves too seriously, because life has to be fun, or else it's boring and silly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Okay, so I come from a background of value investing. Before I started getting into Bitcoin, I started working at 15, started wasting all my money. Grandfather is a longtime value investor, said, hey, I'm going to teach you about this so that you can actually put your money away instead of just pissing it all away. So he got me down the path of read the Warren Buffett biography, read all of the good Benjamin Graham books, like Intelligent Investor and Security Analysis. Like I read all that shit because I was like, okay, well, if I get good at understanding what to do with my money, I don't have to work to earn as much money. So, I came from that world of like super conservative value investing, like real estate investment trusts, Canadian banks, energy companies, dividend reinvestment plans, DCAs, all that kind of stuff. And I got to a point in like 2018 probably where I started to notice, like as I was diving deeper into like macro level stuff of like, how does money work? You go down that how does money work rabbit hole, and it's like a whole realm of stuff. And I started to feel like there was just way more fragility in the system in general at a macro level. And keeping my money in equities, even though it had historically been very stable, started to feel more like a gamble to me. And that's when I kind of switched over, bought a bit of land, put the money in the company I founded and in Bitcoin. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on just like system fragility right now. Like right now, we are January 11th, 2022. What are your thoughts on system fragility, and when do equities go from being a sound investment to a gamble? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I'll tackle this one first. I know Dan and I have talked about this a lot. I think it's been definitely an interesting time, especially me communicating with Dan, because initially, like you said, he started on that Acorns app, which essentially how it works is it just does like roundups where it'll take like you spend $9.50, it rounds it up to $10, and it invests that 50 cents for you in a general index fund. And that's just kind of how it is. You set it, forget it, and then you can have it like, take out weekly things, and it has a portfolio and whatnot. And it just does the S&P 500. So when I was getting into investing, I was going into that with the mindset of, it's like a 7% return or so. And that's good. That's pretty standard. And
offsets cost of capital, so you're not falling behind.
Exactly. And it's better than the high yield savings account that I had at the time, which was like 2%, which now they're like 0.5. But
after bank fees negative.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I mean, after inflation, you're losing crazy money. And so within the past 2020 and everything with the excessive money printing, we've just seen it skyrocket, right? So equities have kind of been in this place where it's free and cheap money, and no matter what the company is, it's kind of hard to figure out whether or not the company is just capitalizing on this free and cheap money, and they're really not, the underlying value isn't what the stock price indicates, or is this company actually being successful. And so investing's been a very easy game, especially in the past year and a half or so.
Everyone's a genius.
Yeah, exactly right. Everybody's a genius in a bull market. And we were Dan and I have kind of talked, and he was kind of hating on some of the returns, and I think it was like a 23% return or something for the S&P, and he was kind of complaining about it. And I was laughing that a few years ago that would be astronomical, and any investor that would get that would be thrilled. And so I think we're kind of in this spot where it's still very cheap money, and we're in a midterm election year, at least in the United States. And I think that they've injected a lot of liquidity in the market the past, what is it, almost 2 years now. And I don't really see that slowing down. I think that, we're kind of in a spot where, the political system in the United States, they want to keep in power. Each party's kind of vying for the majority. And, even though the stock market and equities maybe don't reflect like how well the economy is doing, you and I and us here, we know that, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners know that as well. But to the average person, they think that the stock market is based on the economy, and that's kind of a reflection of how the political party that is in power is doing. And so by injecting all this liquidity and making stocks, always go up, that's just kind of been the narrative of the past 2 years. That'll kind of keep at least the voters somewhat happy come the midterm election time, and thus keeping that party in power. I think that it's just kicking the can down the road, and that we're in for a big crash. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'd be very surprised if it happens within at least within this year, or within this 4-year cycle that we're in. Maybe it's towards the end that we see like that the big doom and gloom crash. But I just see like within at least this next year, we might have a few red days, but overall, I think at the end of the year, we'll be looking at probably something similar to the return we saw last year.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd like to think in probabilities. I've like a couple of years ago, I started to switch of like, I used to have the mental model of like, it's this or this. And then I switched over. I'm like, I'm going to try and look at everything in terms of probabilities, so that I'm never 100% certain on anything. And it's just every new piece of information I get goes and adjusts the probability of X event happening. I think when this does happen, because we know it's a self-terminating system, right? You can kick the can down the road as much as you want, but at the end of the day, the road ends eventually. And everyone, obviously it'd be really nice to know when that road ends, so we can all take precautions against it. But I think it's gonna happen quickly. I don't know how much longer we can do this money printing for. I mean, I think they're going to do it for as long as they can. It's the least worst option out of all the shitty options right now. But I also feel like probably before, one thing I've been sort of thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is this idea that before we have a currency collapse, because the US dollar is going to be the last one to collapse. It's too big, right? All the other ones will fail. We will get many little small failures. I mean, we're already seeing it, right? Like Turkey's a G20 country. That's not I think people are taking that way too lightly. Actually, side note, I just saw today, Strike is now at Argentina. So that's some cool shit, because those people need Strike. Those people need Bitcoin. And so it's cool to see on-ramps reaching out to there. But this whole notion that before we see a collapse, I think what we'll see is a demonetization of non-monies, right? Like I live in Canada. Obviously, the equities market has monetized. And what I mean by monetized is, an equity has a value based on what that share of that company is worth, with a reasonable analysis of like, what's their cash flow, what are their assets, what's their growth potential, all that kind of stuff. But, like companies don't add 25% of value in 1 year. It just doesn't happen, at least not across the board. And that's what you're seeing, right? Houses don't go 25% up in value in 1 year. And in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, that happens. So it's like these things, when money breaks, everything turns into money. Stocks turn into money, pictures of rocks turn into money, homes turn into money, beyond just their utility value. And so I think, I feel like things are going to start to demonetize before we see a big implosion. And maybe people will interpret the demonetization as the implosion, and it just sets off like a fire alarm. But yeah, I mean, it's so, I thought in 2018 when I was getting out of equities, I'm like, for sure, things are collapsing like next year. And then here I am, like, what, 3 years later, 4 years later, I'm like, how the hell did they hold on for this long? And so I don't know. I thought it would happen a long time ago. It still hasn't happened. Maybe it doesn't happen for another 5 years. But the probability of it happening and the level of calamity, if and when it does happen, to me is really adjusting that probability, that risk ratio, right? And I'm always trying to hear people's thoughts, because I think I want to see what the sentiment is amongst smart people who understand it at a macro level. What are your thoughts on that, Dan, on the risk level in the system right now?
I think it's like the system's super fragile. We're already seeing it. We're seeing the collapse of the US dollar in real time. In my opinion, you're seeing countries like India and Russia completely abandon it as their settlement currency. So they're settling arms deals in their own currencies instead of the US dollar. You're seeing countries like El Salvador say it's BS that we have to be back, whether we have to use the US dollar, but we have no say in the people that are in control of the US dollar. And let's keep in mind that the American people also have no say in the Federal Reserve, like who's appointed to the Federal Reserve. Right. So those aren't positions that we vote in. Those are appointed positions. We have no say in it whatsoever. And that's in our own country. And so I think we're seeing it in real time. Who else just did this? Myanmar, I think, has decided to officially go with the Chinese yuan instead of the US dollar. So we're seeing this happen in real time. People don't have a lot of faith in the US dollar. And it's in large part because we've pinned interest rates at zero, essentially, and printed money like crazy. At the same time, we still have states in the US that are partially shut down with their economies. And they happen to be states that like are massive contributors to our countrywide GDP. So our debt to GDP ratio is through the roof right now. It's crazy. I agree with Brandon. I think that throughout 2022, they're going to continue to print money, and these companies are going to have access to easy capital. And we're going to see the same kind of thing that we saw in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. And so as someone who wants to buy a house this year, I can't say I'm super upset about it, because it's probably going to help me get the money I need for a deposit on a house. But at some point, this has to collapse. Now, will they let it happen in 2023? I don't know, maybe, but at some point it has to. You can't just keep printing money, keeping things shut down. And the system-wide fragility. I mean, look at what a few supply chain disruptions have done. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but anecdotally around Tennessee, it's like grocery stores, they're running out of supplies. Like I've never seen grocery stores my entire life. I'm 30 years old. I've never seen grocery stores have no meat when you go in. I've never seen that before. So man, it's pretty damn fragile right now, I'd say.
I think a lot of people, most people won't understand, just like 2008, almost no one understands what the fuck happened and how we just transferred a shitload of wealth from people who are middle and lower class to people who are in the ultra upper class, but no one really knows what happened. And I kind of feel like the same thing's going to happen here, where things are just going to, the floor is going to fall out. We're going to be told, there's going to be a narrative that goes out. And for people who don't take responsibility to actually understand this, that narrative is going to hold true, right? And maybe it's COVID broke our back, or supply chains broke our back, or whatever, some story. And so it kind of concerns me, because people who don't take responsibility for finding out the truth can be told anything. And I feel like the people who are holding Bitcoin are going to be very rich. And it's going to be a very easy, look at them targeting people like Elon Musk, who has paid the most tax of anyone ever in the United States. And yet, Elizabeth Warren loves saying, let's make sure he pays his fair share of taxes. There's so much fuckery in the system. I used to be gung-ho to be like, I hope this thing collapses so that I can have some vindication for everything I've been trying to do to protect my wealth. But now my sort of sentiment has switched, where it's like, I hope it doesn't happen soon, because there's so many more people who we can protect by bringing over to this new system, this Bitcoin system. And the more time buffer, the more time we have, the bigger zone there is to be able to help those people over and reduce suffering. But one thing that really changed for me is I started to do the thought experiment of changing my measuring stick. to something that, I think if you're measuring something, your measuring stick needs to be like a core truth that is stable, unwavering, and actually acts as a good reference point. Because right now, because money's so manipulated, there's no reference point, right? So I've started to kind of use Bitcoin as my measuring stick, as my reference point. And, I had this conversation with my mom, who thinks that she's getting super rich because her house went up 25%. And I kind of had the conversation, like, if you're using fiat as your measuring stick, you got 25% richer. If you're using Bitcoin as your measuring stick, your house got 47% less valuable. And, that's really hard. That's a really hard concept for people to wrap their head around. But this whole notion that really anchoring yourself to reality instead of the fantasy that we're kind of being pushed along with changes your perspective. And so how has your perspective changed on like opportunity cost, the notion of your wealth increasing and how you calculate that? Like, has anything adjusted in your minds, or is anything kind of like percolating that's making you, think a little bit more on how you measure your wealth and whether it's increasing or not? Because even pricing your Bitcoin in US dollars is kind of like, I don't know if that's a reflection of reality. I've thought about that a lot. And I'm like, well, the manipulation happening in the US dollars is going to make me feel like I'm getting way richer, when in reality, I don't know if I am or not. Right. What are your thoughts on all that?
I want to say one thing before we jump into that, Brandon. You mentioned that you used to hope that the system would collapse. It reminded me of that scene in The Big Short. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's about
Where
the
they start
08
dancing?
collapse. When they start dancing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I think about that a lot. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in Ohio, and Ohio has been hit really hard with the opioid crisis. So there's overdoses are going through the roof right now. And a lot of people are saying the job losses that happened throughout COVID contributed to that. And so, I think about that a lot, and it's one of the driving forces for me to try to get people into Bitcoin, because I think, yeah, man, massive job losses and economic crashes, they have serious consequences. Like, people don't have jobs, and then they don't have money, and they, get depressed. And so they go on painkillers, and then they can't afford painkillers. And these things have real ripple effects. So I just wanted to mention that before we jump into how Brandon measures his net worth here.
I think that's a really important point. And I started thinking of like, what is it? Why do I care so much about, like, my life goal now is to become a professional orange pillar. I want to be as good as possible at orange pilling people and helping them understand Bitcoin. And, I have this deep rooted purpose where I'm like, this is all I want to do. I don't actually want to do anything else. I want to radically focus on this. And I was kind of thinking like, I had to articulate it. Like, why am I putting so much energy into this? And what I realized is, like, when you say I'm saving someone's life, I think usually we're thinking like I'm saving someone's biological life, right? Like, cars coming at someone, you push them out the way, you save their biological life. And I've started to view orange pilling people as essentially saving their socioeconomic life. And when you pare that down, it's like, if your socioeconomic life is in pure despair, your health is going to go down the tubes, right? So your biological life is significantly, maybe the primary element that affects your biological life is your socioeconomic life, down to the fact that if you have a terrible socioeconomic life, you might have so much despair that you choose not to live biologically anymore, which is super sad, because I don't think we're talking about, we hear a little bit about overdoses, but we don't hear a lot about like rates of alcoholism, people dying by suicide, people dying by drinking themselves to death. Like, this is, these second, third order effects are actually, it's really sad, because the things that matter most, those are really important in terms of evaluating whether what we're doing to this pandemic is good or bad. It seems like it's not even being factored in. So yeah, I don't want things to collapse. I hope it's like a soft landing where we're able to kind of like transition nicely while saving as many people's socioeconomic lives as possible. But at the end of the day, there is going to, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I think we've been, framed as a drug addict. We've been high for a long time, and the withdrawal is going to suck. And at least hopefully we can go through it together so that we can support each other as we go through this. Because even as a Bitcoiner, like your wealth, everyone's wealth is going to get hacked hard. I think Bitcoiners have a better opportunity to preserve their wealth and to be better on the other side when all the dust settles. But yeah, I think about it a lot too, because I have two parents who don't earn money anymore. They're retired, and their wealth is melting at 20% a year at this pace. And they think they're getting richer. And it's like, where's the disconnect there? And these are smart people. Like, both my parents, I would consider them pretty smart. And yet it is too convenient to not think about this, I think, until it's not. And when it's not, it's going to suck. So Brandon, what are your thoughts on, how does one, in today's world where most of our measuring sticks are insanely manipulated, how do we measure our wealth? How do we make sure we're moving forward? Basically, how do we make sure that our wealth is being preserved, and like what are the metrics? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, something that's very tough. And, I just kind of hammer home that point that you guys both brought up about, doom and gloom crashes. I agree with both of you, because I think, when it comes to these crashes, it seems that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and that wealth gap definitely, drastically increases. And I think there's a stat like the bottom 42% of Americans don't have any investable assets. But that can change with things like Bitcoin, where you can buy a few sats for, a couple thousand sats for $1 or something like that. So it doesn't take much to get started or get off zero, as a lot of Bitcoin Twitter likes to say. But for me, it's been tough. I think one interesting thing that we started doing is, when we analyze equities, we don't analyze it in the US dollar, or we analyze it in the US dollar, but we also analyze it in Bitcoin. And, from all these charts that we put out, I think the biggest thing is you just see a drastic increase in the US dollar and a drastic decrease in the Bitcoin realm. And I don't know if we've even analyzed one that's been positive in the past year over Bitcoin. And so that just kind of, makes me, realize a little bit of, what you were saying. And it almost seems like it's almost like a lost cost, putting it in to some sort of equity instead of just putting it into Bitcoin. So, I was fortunate enough to, in September of 2020, to close on a duplex here in Tampa, Florida. And it's, it's similar to, globally, and, even more so here in the Tampa area. The houses have skyrocketed. And, it's been on mostly borrowed money with, a big house loan. There's a loan here in the States where you can, get a loan that's, you only have to put 3.5% down. So 96.5% loan to value of the house. Extremely powerful, but, it still took quite a bit of money to get this house. And the thing that I worry about, here is a lot of my friends and colleagues, around my age, who, maybe have a ton of student loans or something else, or, their car breaks down, they had to get a new car, and used car prices are skyrocketing. So instead of, they're getting a fine used car for 10 grand, it's now 25, and everything around them is just going up. And, their wages and their income aren't. So they're having to start to either work a side hustle, whether it's, driving Uber Eats on the nights or weekends, or driving Uber, or, doing something on that nature. And it's just, causing these people to work, extra hard. And it's good and bad. Obviously I'm benefiting from it with the house prices somewhat. But like you said, if you look at it in Bitcoin, the house value isn't really increasing all that much. But, according to the average person, and I could go to the bank right now and pull out quite a bit of equity, and all I did was live in my house for a year.
Right.
I didn't really do any improvements or anything like that. So I think it's a lot of, like we were saying earlier, just a lot of easy access to capital. And, eventually that's gonna be bad news. And I think, like, the only thing that we really can do to combat this is just, invest our wealth as much as we can to try to grow it. And I think, just stacking stats, and even though, it seems like kind of like the easy thing to do, and maybe, after you get into it for a little bit, it almost feels like investing in the S&P 500 index fund to me at this point, where it's just, don't even got to think about it. I'm just, every paycheck I'm putting in sats. I know Dan will probably mention that he hourly cost average on Strike, and he loves telling people that. But I mean, it's, it's something easy to do, and it's extremely beneficial. And I think, in the long term, it's going to help my own personal wealth out. And I agree to your sentiment. I'm just trying to, orange pill as many people as I can because, they're my friends and family that I care about. And I see that the system is, drastically hurting them. And, they're saying to me, you got lucky, you invested, in this and you took like a little bit of a risk and, your house price went extremely skyrocketed where, maybe they didn't have enough for a down deposit, but, what my advice to them is just, get invested and get off zero, and get yourself some of that some satoshis and it can really help in the long run and you'll be thanking yourself later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we should all focus on investing in our future selves. I think it seems to me that a lot of people I know conflate investing with saving. And I think it's important to make the distinction where like saving shouldn't involve risk, but saving requires a shitload of research to find out how you actually save. Because I haven't found anything except for stacking sats that I can reliably save money in. One thing I have sort of played with in terms of figuring out like what are my real returns if I have equities, or what are my real returns if I have a home, is just correcting for M2 increase, and seeing, like it hurts to let people know that that's the reality, but they're still plus, they're still positive, they're keeping up with cost capital. They're, my mom might not have made 25%, but maybe she's making 6% and above the cost capital, and that's pretty good, right? But I think we need to really be honest with ourselves as to what's actually happening, because it's not that your house is going up 25%, your currency just got 20% shittier. And I think that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. But I think more that's kind of like a big nudge for people to say, okay, things aren't as I thought they were. Maybe I should look into this. And yeah, I mean, all roads lead to Bitcoin eventually. Like my mom, she's not going to self-custody Bitcoin right away, but she has exposure with the ETF to make sure that some of her wealth is preserved and she has some protection there. And then, I got her a hardware wallet for Christmas, and now she's going to like pull out little bits and just play with it. And I think that's, the older people, the boomers, I don't think they've experienced near enough pain to stimulate putting energy into figuring out the truth about money. And, my hope is that we get kind of like these little micro doses of pain so that hopefully people have a chance to learn about this. But my fear is that we're going to have a mega dose of pain. But regardless, I think just like these kind of conversations are where it starts, right? Just like airing out everything, sharing what we know as our most valuable solution that we see right now. And, this whole notion that if you are protecting your time, you have a lot more time to look into things. And this is this vicious cycle I see with health where people are like struggling a huge amount with their health. And just like the friends that you're talking about, like people take an extra job just to make ends meet. And they're like, I hardly even have time to take care of my family, put food on the table and pay for my house. And now you're telling me to tear down my entire worldview and build it back up from scratch. It's like, no, I don't have time for that. And what they don't realize is like, yeah, you don't have time because your time's being stolen. I'm trying to help you understand how to not have your time stolen so that you can have time. But I get that it's a hard sell right now because no one has the bandwidth. And I more or less, I just think it's a shame that people are being, essentially our leaders are preventing people from having the bandwidth to figuring out the truth because it's not in their interest, right? It's not in the government's interest for people to actually figure out the truth. So, but on a more positive note, we just entered 2022. You have people like Bill Miller coming out and saying he owns 50% of his personal wealth is in Bitcoin, 50% is in Amazon. And, like these little bullish nudges that I see, and I'm like, how the fuck is this not priced in? Like this guy's one of the OG most wealthy people who has a big influence on the world, comes out and says, I got 50% of my dough in Bitcoin. And, Ray Dalio was there saying 2%, whatever. But, like what are the most bullish things that you're most excited about for 2022, in Bitcoin or in anything, or just in your life or for Green Candle, whatever you want? What are the things you're most excited about with 2022? Because I think there's never a shortage of things to be doom and gloom about, but there's also never a shortage of things to be hyped about. It just depends what you choose to focus on. So I feel like we've been doom and gloom for a while. So let's talk about things we're excited about. Daniel, you want to go first and let us know, what are you most excited about for 2022?
Sure. Yeah. I'll be honest, man. This is probably going to surprise Brandon when I say it, but I'm excited to see what Jack Dorsey does in 2022.
Dude, me too.
I was on the fence about Dorsey for the longest time while he was still at Twitter. but free Jack is a different guy. I mean, this guy's like ripping. And I've been Brandon and I and a few of our friends have been trying to figure out like why aren't there more Bitcoin miners? And we just saw which company just bought Bitcoin instead of allocating capital to new miners. Yeah, Bitfarms. So it's like we're trying to figure this out. Well, why are they doing that? Why aren't they just allocating that towards more miners? Well, there aren't any miners. Like the manufacturing is so behind. So to then like the next day or 2 days later to see Block come out and say, we're hiring a team that's going to make the next generation of miners, like that to me is super bullish. They're going to hit the demand for mining rigs is so high right now and the supply is so low. If they can nail this thing, man, I think it's super bullish, not only for Block, but for the Bitcoin network. So I'm excited to see what Jack Dorsey does.
They came out with that a while ago. It was kind of covert and under the radar, but this was probably like 3 or 4 months ago when Spiral, when the name Spiral was applied to like a division of blocks. And what they're talking about was essentially coming out with a home miner that anyone can buy and plug in. So I don't know if their target market is the industrial commercial mining division, but yeah, man, when stuff like that, you got Blockstream who bought Spawn Dualies, who's coming out with, who's essentially iterating and developing a new generation of miner that can be manufactured outside of China, which I think is very important because I think that was a huge threat vector if things went that way, and I'm glad they didn't. And then you have companies like Spiral, working to create a home mining machine with open source development plans. So like everything they're doing, whether it's TBDEX, like the decentralized exchange, or whether it's the open source hardware wallet or signing mechanism. I'm starting to say hardware wallet less and signing device more because I think that's actually more appropriate. Dude, they're going to do some amazing shit. And Jack gets it, right? Like Jack, he explicitly said at the Bitcoin conference, he said, you know what? I think Twitter and Square have important roles to play in Bitcoin, but if Bitcoin needed my help, I would leave them for Bitcoin. And sure enough, I mean, I'm sure he fucking hated his job at Twitter for a long time because like it was getting so bad, man. I think what Jack wants to do and what Jack can do were very different things at Twitter. And I think he's realizing that the way to do what he wants to do is build open source protocols no one can stop so that he can no longer be a choke point. And I think at Twitter, he was a choke point. So yeah, I resound with that of being like, I am very curious to see what Jack does because he's a powerful force.
And if it's home miners, I'm even more bullish on it because I've been saying for a while, like I think too much mining capabilities in the hands of large companies. Like eventually these companies are going to acquire each other. They're going to merge. Like this is going to happen with large companies in this kind of system. And then those companies are also subjected to things like subpoenas. So, if you sign up with a Compass miner, you're taking away, like, one of the big reasons to have a mining rig in your house is so that you can get non-KYC sats. Right. Well, if it's hosted by some large company, they know your information. And if they get slapped with a subpoena, they're going to have to comply with it. So if it's home mining, man, I'm even more bullish on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a matter of time, right? Like Intel's going to get into mining. Apple's going to get into mining. Google's going to get into mining. I don't know when, but if Apple has a quarter of a brain and they have trillions of dollars, like they're a pretty smart group, they're going to see that, well, building computers isn't that profitable, but building specialized computers to create the world's hardest money, like maybe we should get into that. We can push it out to 1 billion people if we develop something in house, and we literally are developing chips. Like, come on, Tim, wake up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I mean that's like Dan said in the open. I'm a little surprised to hear that over at Kuman as he I mean, but to y'all's point, I mean, I think Jack was a little handcuffed when it came to Twitter, and although he did do the tipping over the Lightning Network, with Twitter, I think that, yeah, like you said, he was trying to do a little bit, and I think he was getting restricted. So I'm very bullish on Jack and Bitcoin and on Block for this next year and beyond. So I'm excited to see what he does as well. But I think the most exciting thing for me is to see which one of these large companies is going to announce that they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I think it's bound to happen. And I think that, in 2022, there's going to be more big names that come out, and it's just going to make it even more bullish because, every time we get a dip, it seems like Michael Saylor's announcing that his company is buying the dip in MicroStrategy. And soon enough, all these companies are going to wake up and they're going to realize, okay, we got to get on board or we're going to get left behind. And not kind of secondary to large companies, I think it'll be interesting to see which companies or which countries kind of follow suit with El Salvador. I think you mentioned earlier that Argentina, now can use strike in their country, and I think that would be a very powerful thing to make Bitcoin legal tender in Argentina. And I think that there's going to be some more of these small countries globally that start to adopt it. And we've kind of, as Dan mentioned earlier, seen a little bit of some countries move away from the US dollar. And I think that trend's going to continue. And I wouldn't be surprised to see at least a couple more countries in 2022 designate Bitcoin as legal tender. So companies and countries coming in on the network in the next years is something that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I think like my sort of perspective on low probability events that are insanely impactful and can really be like paradigm shifters. Like, what if Saudi Arabia buys 50 billion of Bitcoin? They have so much money. Like, it's not outlandish to say that. And the probability is low, but as time passes, that probability creeps slightly higher. And the amount of other cases that could be similar, like what if Apple buys 20 billion of Bitcoin, right? This whole notion that there are a lot of rich people who are going to catch on to this sooner or later. And all it takes is one to set out this whole new game theoretical model of, okay, well, now countries have to acquire Bitcoin or else they by default will fall significantly behind. And this whole notion that, even just, the other day, the president of El Salvador dunked on Hanky. Hanky's saying some stupid shit that he doesn't understand what he's saying, right? I think he's just another senile old man that's on another dinosaur that's waiting to croak. But, the president dunks on him and says, you know what? I'm going to teach you a lesson about energy because clearly you know nothing. And he did this beautiful thread on Twitter about a summary of all the projects they have going on in terms of energy generation and their plans. And it just made me feel so invigorated to see like this dude is putting together he put together $1 billion natural gas plant, which is going to, El Salvador is going to go from an energy importer to an energy exporter to the countries next to them. And, it seems like that's a perfect situation to build a conglomerate of countries who are mining Bitcoin, who are sharing energy, who are producing a radical amount of energy. And just in, their Bitcoin bond, I think that could be a seminal moment in the history of Bitcoin when a country starts funding itself with Bitcoin bonds. I really, El Salvador is an experiment. I don't know which way it goes. It seems like it was earlier than I had anticipated, but you got to start sometime. And, there's the amount of low probability, insanely bullish things is increasing. Their probability is increasing. And I don't think it takes much to really rattle the cage and shift demand, not even that much. And if supply is completely inflexible, then it does some crazy shit to the price. Like we haven't seen, when have you been deeply into Bitcoin? Have you seen any of the insane shit, like a doubling in 5 days? Have you been witness to any of those things with a significant amount of money in Bitcoin?
I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it go. I haven't seen it double, but I've got a sell history of 0, and I got in early 2021. So I've seen it go up and down a few times.
Yeah, dude, wait until we have some big ass green candles. I mean, we haven't seen the wild shit. Granted, there might be a lower likelihood of wild shit happening because of the amount of stability there is with big companies owning big chunks, but I don't think we're beyond the wild shit yet. And I think it's gonna be awesome when we see a 50% green candle at some point. I don't know, maybe that's naive optimism, but I don't think it's beyond Bitcoin. Bitcoin has always surprised me. I've been in Bitcoin since 2015, and I've seen some crazy shit, both on the upside and the downside. But we haven't seen any of this crazy shit yet. Like people are freaking out over like a 30%, 40% drawdown. It's like, dude, that can happen in one fucking day. I don't know. Maybe it's more stable now, but time will tell.
I mean, I've seen a lot of these dips, and it's mostly been on the upward trajectory. So I mean, I got in was just trading around a little bit in 2016. I wasn't really playing around in too much in 2017 and at the beginning of 2018 when it dipped. But yeah, I mean, from my experience of Bitcoin, it's just been almost, up, up, up. And then, now we're having this little drawdown. But, luckily I've been in it for so long that, I understand enough about the technology where the rides don't really affect me as much as they used to. I know we've talked a lot, Dan and I, about, consistently looking at the Bitcoin price. When you first get into it, it's kind of that addicting thing. You always want to see, like, all right, like you're saying, like, when is it going to happen? When is that next big 50% draw up or draw down? And that kind of like affects your mood going on for the entire day. But yeah, I mean, I think if we see some of these, giant green candles, especially within this next year, you'll see a lot of people who want to get in it and FOMO in. And I think that, that's just beneficial to the space, as long as, they don't get, wrecked initially. And it's just like, all right, they get in and then they kind of learn, about the power of Bitcoin and the technology of it as well. Because, that's kind of what happened to me. I came to make money, and then I stayed because I believe in the hard money.
Came for the money, stayed for the money. I like that. Let's do some rapid fire questions to round this out. So why don't we go tic-tac-toe? Let's start with Dan, and then we'll go Brandon. I'll just fire some questions. There's no wrong answer. Quick, punchy, whatever first comes to mind. And then they'll wrap the sucker up. And I appreciate you guys being available today. So first question, let's start with Brandon. Who's your favorite person to hear talk about Bitcoin?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Our pal on Twitter, Bitcoin Gandalf, every time he talks, I learned so much from him. And he comes on our Twitter Spaces, and he's got his podcast as well that's just super informative. I like him. And then a little bit underrated podcast as well as the Canadian Bitcoiners. We like to interact with them a lot, and I learn a lot from them as far as like macro equities and things like that, especially things going on in Canada too, how other people are looking at whether it's Bitcoin from a global perspective, or also like how the United States policies are affecting Bitcoin.
Cool. Shout out to Bitcoin Gandalf and Joey and Len, Canadian Bitcoiners podcast. Solid dudes. Dan, most recommended Bitcoin book?
Oh man, I just finished Price of Tomorrow. It was pretty good. I still need to get to Saifedean's newest one. So
Fiat Standard?
I don't know. Can it not be about Bitcoin?
Yeah. What's your most recommended book, period? How's that one?
Okay. The Possessed by Dostoevsky, 100%.
Magic. I love that. That was a firm answer.
Yeah. It takes like 250 pages to get into it, but it's hands down. I reread it every year, and it's something everyone should read at least once.
What do you like most about it? Like, what's the most powerful element of it for you?
Well, what I love about Dostoevsky, first of all, classic Russian literature beats any other literature hands down, without a doubt, every single day. But what I love most about Dostoevsky is if you read his books in order, like from Notes from the Underground, teaches you that people can go a little crazy with their own thoughts. And then if you read Crime and Punishment, which is his next big novel, it teaches you that you can act on those thoughts, and things that you expect to happen won't happen. And then The Possessed is my favorite because it shows you that individual actions can have major consequences outside of yourself. So if you read Dostoevsky in that order, from Notes from the Underground, Crime and Punishment, and then The Possessed, you see you can go crazy, you can act on those thoughts, and those thoughts can have real world consequences that you didn't imagine. So as I love Dostoevsky, he's my favorite author of all time.
Dude, thanks for that nugget. I might have to, I'm really selective these days with what I read, because I have just too many books that I actually reread books more frequently than I read new books. But I might have to get into his first one and see what it's about, because that was a good pitch.
Man, it's just Russian literature in general. I go all day about Russian literature. It's like half my bookshelf. So.
You talk to Lex Friedman. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you about Russian literature.
I was gonna respond. I thought you were gonna ask me my favorite person to listen to, and Alex Gladstein.
Let's hear that.
Alex Gladstein would have been mine, and the first time I heard him was on Lex's podcast. So,
dude, okay. So I'm doing a session with Gladstein in the upcoming future. He just had a baby, so we haven't scheduled it yet. But it's going to be, I'm basically going to do a deep dive into what he talked about with Lex, because this whole notion of Bitcoin as freedom technology, I really want to unpack that. So I'm going to go hard on that interview. And yeah, he's a force for Bitcoin being viewed through the lens of human rights. And I think it's an underappreciated lens, I think, because it's not relevant to most of us, lucky ass people who live in North America. But I find it really curious, because that's really where the adoption is not a want, it's a need. And I think that's where we're going to see like the insane spikes, because it's not when it's not an option to not adopt Bitcoin, guess what? You fucking adopt Bitcoin because your life depends on it. Your socioeconomic life depends on it. And I think, I don't think a lot of press comes from the really significant things happening as we speak. Brandon, what's your definition of being orange pilled?
I think I'm gonna keep it real simple. Just getting off zero. Just investing something in sats, because I think, once you have some sort of money or skin in the game, that means you're gonna start looking into it. Whether it's $50, 5,000, however many, or even a dollar, however much you have at risk, usually gets people to at least take a deeper dive. And then once that happens, it's all hands on deck.
Yeah, you just got to get the first domino to fall, and then Bitcoin takes care of the rest. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time today, taking an hour and 20 minutes out of your day. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us at the Stoa. I loved hearing the story of green candles and sort of your thoughts on all these things, and I look forward to continuing to connect over Twitter Spaces, or doing another one of these next year or something like that, or later this year. We just started this year. That's too long. And like 1 year in Bitcoin is like 7 years. Like there's the dog year analogy, is like, I don't know what the Bitcoin year multiple is, but it's getting more crazy as time goes on, it seems. If people want more information about what you're working on, or want to find both you guys, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Green Candle IT. You can find us on YouTube if you just search Green Candle. And then you could also find our Substack, where we write 3 newsletters a day. If you like our content, feel free to subscribe. It's at greencandleinvestments.substack.com. And yeah, you could find our personal Twitter accounts in our Green Candle bio as well, if you just want to follow us for some of our sports takes or something else. So
that's by the way, that's 3 newsletters a week, not per day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, dude, you guys are churning. I love it.
We're not churning and burning that much.
3 a week is still, I mean, that's a good pace. That's a solid pace to keep. And I think, it helps when there's 2 people, because you can keep each other accountable. And, I used to do a weekly podcast for the Health Network, and like once a week, if it's quality signal, is like, that's a lot of work. So 3 articles a week. I think you guys are doing awesome work. Check out what these guys are doing at Green Candle. And to everyone listening, thanks for being here. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to support the project, head to bitcoinstoa.com. You can send some sats to the QR code there on the homepage. We are 100% and will always be 100% community supported, because I don't think ads can really be done objectively as the way it works right now. And I'm doing a podcast at the end of this week with Gigi, who came out with an amazing article about value for value, and this notion that getting back to this style of compensation where you just pay based on the value you got is like this beautiful mechanism that we've had all along with like busking or something like that I think is going to have a renaissance now that we can do nano transactions, right? When I can send you a couple sats with a cool message, that's going to open up some serious doors. I don't think it's really reached breakthrough level yet, but like we use it and for the podcast, and it's pretty cool to see. It's like the first time you send a lightning payment, it costs you 1 sat. It's like, oh shit, this is here already. It's maybe not like user experience A+ level, but like if I can figure it out, we're not that far. So anyway, thanks for listening, y'all, and ciao for now.